Political analyst Professor Tinyiko Maluleke believes that some parts of government knew that the unrest we've seen would unfold in some form and did nothing to try to curb the situation. Let's bring him in, get more on his insights as we take stock of the week gone by. Prof, great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. There are some who also believe that, yes, the insurrection that we've seen, as the president had described it, failed, but the response to it was also a failure. Is that a perception you share?
Yes, I share that very much. And one doesn't have to be a doesn't have to be a conspiracy behind it. It's just based on what we have seen. We had for weeks threats being made about making the country ungovernable should this and that happen. And we then saw, it happened starting, let's say, Thursday past, when trucks were being bent on the freeway, the entry was being blocked. And then it all started, and the police were either absent or just watching those who were there. Now, there's not an inch of South African soil which is not covered by one police station or another. And so it is amazing how they all seemed just to watch, at least for the beginning of the mayhem. You can talk about being surprised on the first day, but you can't keep getting surprised for the next 48 hours and more.
Of course, in a country like ours, ANC politics not too far removed from how government responds to issues of national importance. I wonder to what extent you believe the government's response had President Cyril Ramaphosa's ambitions of a second term in the ANC at the center of it. In other words, if Ramaphosa wasn't seeking to get a second term in the ANC, could we have expected a different response to the week gone by?
No, look, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. Of course, it has to do with ANC politics. It has to do with general incompetence in government and lack of coordination. But it also has to do with a deep-seated sense of factions and factionalism, which is really, which are built around corruption. I mean, the factions are all really about corruption and access to resources. So you have to take all of these things together. So in my view, the absence of government and the inaction of the police, in other words, was to some extent a strategic looking away of government. I mean, they turned a blind eye, to use a figure of speech, to something which is not only something they knew about, but something that was happening right before them. But I think there was, at some level, a deliberate turning of a blind eye to allow this thing to happen, not merely to stop Ramaphosa from being re-elected. I think it was allowed to happen because the looting is deeply embedded in the culture of the country. I mean, we see the looters today, and we see them carrying television sets and so on. And they were basically shopping freely. They were not looting with any panic. But actually, what they do is not very different from what your sophisticated political people with connections, political leaders, even corporate executives do. It's just that they loot at a very advanced level. They burn down warehouses, metaphorical warehouses of the country at a very sophisticated level. But what you saw in the streets is what actually obtains in government for much of the time. Hence, government decided to go absent without leave for a moment.
Essentially, this looting we've seen was role modeled by people who are meant to essentially, I guess, point the country to a different direction. Given that, did Ramaphosa then miss an opportunity to at the very least acknowledge that in the many speeches he's had to the nation in the week gone by?
I think it's a good thing that he acknowledged that there were weaknesses in government, but the explanation he gave us, good. It's not helpful at all. It's not good enough to tell us we were not prepared. Of course, you were not prepared when the banning of trucks started, maybe, but I don't understand why you were not prepared when speech after speech at Nkandla told you what was coming. I don't understand why you were not prepared when you know the levels of inequality in the country for so long and the policy gaps that exist in that regard, when you know how dire the situation is for many people. Now, be that as it may, maybe you were surprised on Thursday. Why were you still surprised on Tuesday? Why did it take 4.5 days for the Minister of Police to appear and speak to the nation, and then only to speak in parables about 12 suspects who will soon be apprehended, and then we will tell you more? Not helpful at all. Not 5 days after mayhem and banning and loss of life.
I wonder what we should make of the response from different sectors of society today. The ANC is out in Soweto, the DA, we're told, heading to Pietermaritzburg, the IFP in KwaMashu in KZN. You and I think, will connect the dots quite easily. You are instantly reminded that we're in an election year, and I guess, for better or for worse, many parties will take advantage of this moment. What do we make of that?
Well, I wish they took advantage of this moment last Thursday when this whole mayhem started. Not Thursday before last, actually. I mean, what kind of taking advantage of a situation is this when you wait for 200 people to die, when you wait for so many billions worth of rands to be destroyed, when you wait for this looming jobs bloodbath that is coming? And then only you come around in your SUVs and your German hatchbacks with loudspeakers to talk to the community. It's a little bit late. Even with an election year, I can't understand the logic. This is not the response of agency, of people who fear that they might not be returned to power. It's not that response. People who fear that they might not be returned to power would have been in the thick of things, would have seen the police at least trying. Someone would have instructed them to get in there and try to stop this. Right when the shenanigans were starting at Nkandla, the police would have started to act right there to stop this. So I don't see the agency of election year. I don't see the agency of trying to save jobs. I don't see the agency of trying to save lives, even with these expeditions that you refer to of political parties and government ministers and MECs, premiers going into so-called hotspots. It's a little bit late, and it's rather lazy for people who want to be elected. I think they believe they will be elected whatever happens.
Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, always great getting your insights, sir. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Professor Maluleke is a political analyst.